Yeah, so the title of the webinar today is Be Ready to Pass Your Oracle Audit. So what I'll do is I'm going to go through a brief agenda with you, what we're going to go through today on the webinar. So the first thing that I'll do is go through a brief introduction of who you're talking to. I know we've got some of our existing customers on the call as well, so apologies, I won't take too long in this introduction because I know you know who we are already. I'll then cover an overview of Oracle audit behavior from sort of a high-level process perspective, so you know exactly what to expect if you're going to go for a process such as this. I'll then give you what I consider to be the top 3 tips for optimizing your Oracle licensing. So a lot of these tips actually focus on Oracle database, and I know that Oracle obviously do a number of other products, but obviously on a 30-minute webinar, you know, we've only got time to go through so much, so I thought I'd deal with the absolute main ones that generally crop up in an audit situation. Next, we'll go through how to be prepared for an Oracle audit, so what we recommend the process to be there, and we'll have a wrap-up at the end, which is kind of just a call to action. So I'm just going to quickly mute a couple of the other people who have just joined. Bear with me. Okay, great. So a brief introduction for you. So the guy on the left there is myself, Chris Lester. I'm Civica's lead SAM consultant, and I actually work for Civica Software and Infrastructure Services. So Civica S&IS are a unit within the Civica group, the wider Civica group, and specifically we deal around licensing SAM and some infrastructure services as well. Sorry, we've had another person calling in, so I'm just going to mute them as well. Okay. So our mission statement, or vision, if you like, is to help organizations transform their services, achieving better outcomes through more connected and efficient ways of working, enabled by the use of digital technology and automation. And obviously licensing and software asset management is hugely a part of that. So just a little bit about our accolades. We were recently awarded Service Provider Partner of the Year by Snow Software. For those of you that know Snow, they're one of the biggest movers and shakers in the SAM tool market at the moment. And through our managed services, we've actually optimized over 500,000 devices for SAM and licensing over the course of our existence. Just to give you some figures around that, typically our managed service customers generally see an ROI of about 7 to 1, so 7 times the value of what they pay for our service, and generally we've got a good record of our customers recommending us. And in fact, in our last survey, we had 100% of managed service customers actually recommending us to other people in the industry. So I said I'd keep the introduction brief, and I'll go straight into it. So here's a brief overview of general Oracle audit behavior. So I'd imagine with some people on the call, you have already been contacted by Oracle. Others you may not have been yet, and you're probably lucky to have not been as such. Oracle do take quite a heavy-handed approach to auditing customers, one of the heaviest in the market. So the question you might be wondering is, who's actually contacting you from Oracle? Who are you actually speaking to on the phone? And typically speaking, there are 2 sets of people who may get in contact with you. First of all, there's COLS, which stands for the Customer Optimization Licensing Specialists. So these guys are basically a sales team. They're account managers. They're one of the best sales teams in the industry. They're very much target-driven, and if you're contacted by them and they're asking you to give you information, the thing to bear in mind is you're not actually under an official Oracle audit at that point, so they're not authorized to do official audits or guarantee compliance. The other people who may contact you could be LMS. So LMS stands for License Management Services. So this is Oracle's official audit team that they employ internally. They're the only entity within Oracle that are actually authorized to certify your compliance position, and they're the only entity authorized to ask you to run any scripts as well. So if any of you have been given scripts from anyone, they're the only team allowed you to do that. So what I've included underneath here is the Oracle audit clause. So if you have any Oracle products, this is actually what you're contractually obliged to provide. This will be in the terms and conditions of what you've signed up to. And what this states is that within 45 days written notice, Oracle may audit the use of your programs. You agree to cooperate with Oracle's audit and provide reasonable assistance and access to information. Any such audit shall not unreasonably interfere with your normal business operations. You agree to pay within 30 days written notification and any fees applicable to the use of your programs in excess of license rights. If you do not pay, Oracle can end your technical support licenses and/or this agreement, and you agree Oracle shall not be responsible for any of the costs incurred when cooperating with an audit. So pretty heavy stuff. So what does this actually look like in terms of their process and how Oracle go through the process of selecting people to audit? So this at a very high level is the general process and how they engage with customers like yourself. So the first step to any Oracle either Coles salesperson or LMS person will be to look at an internal nomination for a customer. So typically what they're doing with this is they'll be gathering information about your estate. They will be looking at things like no recent spend of Oracle, if you cancelled any of your annual support, any mergers or acquisitions. These are typically some red flags that Oracle might look at when engaging with a customer and seeing if there's any potential to rectify any compliance problems you may or may not have. So the next stage to this is to internally, still at this point, request within Oracle a lit report, which is essentially your licensing entitlement and what you can and can't do. And to do some further qualification with the customer that they have. So this may be a salesperson calling you up, asking you some questions. Typical ones they might look at are, do you run Oracle in a VMware or Hyper-V environment? And just some general questions around what products are you running, what options are you using within those products, which we'll cover in a little bit more detail later. So the next step in the process is Oracle will send you a notification letter. So you'll get a notification letter across essentially stating that you're under an Oracle audit. And if you remember us reading through the clause on the previous slide, essentially what that means is once you get that notification letter, you have 45 days to respond to them, elect a single point of contact for them to deal with, and get on with giving them a time frame for completing the audit. The next step, there will be some scoping done and a kickoff call. They'll also send you over something called an OSW, called an Oracle Server Worksheet. That is essentially what they'll use to confirm your license position. So they'll be taking data from your estate, what Oracle databases you've got, where are they, what are they doing, etc. If you're contacted by LMS, the next step will be to send over some scripts to you. So an important thing about Oracle licensing, you can actually have a database in your estate, but the options that can be configured with that installation can sometimes cost multiples of the original software that you're putting into the estate. So what the scripts do is they will essentially harvest that information to see whether any of these options have been used in the past or are currently in use as well. Again, just to stress at this point, LMS are the only people who can ask you to run scripts. So if you're going through, or what you think you're going through is a process like this and you haven't been asked to run scripts, then it won't be LMS that's contacting you. So once the scripts have been run and the information's been put together, the results from the server worksheet and the scripts will be sent back to Oracle. They'll produce what's known as an interim report. And they'll then probably get you on a call at that point and talk you through the findings that they've got. There'll be a chance to contest some of those findings and potentially move it on to a final report. But the important thing Oracle will do is they'll try and obtain validation of the report's accuracy. So they'll try and get you to say, yes, we agree, this is what our position is. And once you've agreed that, the report gets handed over to the Oracle sales team. So there's a few extra pieces of information I'd like to throw in at this point. So Oracle's licensing sales revenue is actually 50% driven by audit on its existing customer base, which is a huge amount of revenue, as I'm sure you can imagine. So a lot of people are going through this process on a day-to-day basis. And actually with the cloud, and Oracle are very cloud-centric these days, 65% of their revenue is for cloud is driven through audit as well. The important thing to note when the report goes back to the sales team is that they are a sales team. They are driven by financial targets. So what they may propose as a solution to rectify your issue obviously is a solution that will rectify your issue, but it may not be necessarily the most cost effective to the business. So we always say it's worthwhile getting a second opinion, speaking to a partner, and even if you're at the very end of an audit process, there's definitely value in having a conversation with someone. Oracle are very, very happy as well to engage their legal team if you do not comply with the audit clause. So at every point in this process, I would say give Oracle adequate notification if you're going to do something, give them accurate timeframes, and try to be courteous. I know it's not a very nice process to be going through, but it never helps to be kind of offish towards anyone. So I've put 3 tips together for optimizing your licensing position. So generally speaking, it's good to get ahead of the curve. People can still offer value, so Oracle partners can still offer value if you're going through an audit, but generally speaking, what you want to try and do is get ahead of the curve, so potentially rectify any issues you may have before getting to that point of an audit. So the first one I'd just like to cover is the virtualization clause, really, and this comes under the partitioning policy. If you've not seen this, there's actually a document you can get on Oracle's website which goes into detail about how you can partition certain hardware resources to the Oracle database. And essentially there's 2 different types of partitioning. You've got soft partitioning or hard partitioning. So soft partitioning is unfortunately the most common one we find with customers. So that's if you have an Oracle database which is sitting on VMware or Hyper-V or other popular virtualization technologies. Those are the main ones. And then there is hard partitioning, which is basically OVM, Oracle Virtual Machine, Solaris Containers, IBM's LPAR, and more. So you can download that online if you want to see a full list of those. So this is really a red flag to Oracle. So if they understand that you're running an Oracle database in a VMware or Hyper-V environment, I can tell you from experience, they will be 100% on it. They will be looking to proceed with an audit as soon as possible. And that's simply because they don't recognize the technology as a way of restricting the Oracle database to a single machine. Even though we all know that it works within the software, it's not on a trusted Oracle technology. So what I've done, just to illustrate this further, is I've provided a very common example we find with a lot of customers. So what we have here is a very simple environment of 4 virtual hosts, which are running ESX server. So there's something, for those of you who don't run a VMware, there's something called vMotion DRS, and essentially that allows the virtual machines to use all of the pool of resources, so automatically load balance onto another host if the processing power is being taken up on one. So in this scenario, we said that's disabled. So within the software, it means that Oracle database is restricted to just one server and one server only. So you might look at the scenario and you might say to yourself, well, we've applied a core factor to the Oracle Database Enterprise Edition. We can see that the hardware it's using is a requirement to license with 8 enterprise processor licenses. Great, that's all we need. That's going to cost us X amount of money. Let's do it, and problem solved. Well, actually, no, because it's considered soft partitioning. What Oracle will do, just for that one instance of Oracle database, is they will presume that the server can be on host 2, on host 3, and on host 4 at any given point. So actually, you're not talking about 8 enterprise processor licenses. You're actually talking about 32 enterprise processor licenses, or 4 times the cost. Now, obviously, Oracle Database is an extremely expensive product. So if you are doing something like this, where you've got Oracle sitting in a virtual cluster and it's running VMware, Hyper-V, or any other technology, I would highly recommend that you look to try and redesign the environment, potentially getting a Oracle partner in, such as Civica, to review it and basically sanction what you're trying to do. Because the amount of risk that can be caused just by having a virtual cluster like this is huge, and it can certainly increase your financial costs of running that software. So the next tip I have is really around disaster recovery. What I've done here is I've included the clause for disaster recovery on this page. So this is taken off another Oracle piece of documentation online. And I've underlined the critical pieces to this. So the failover data recovery method is an example of a cluster deployment where multiple nodes and servers have access to a single storage/SAN. It includes the right to run the licensed programs on an unlicensed spare computer in a failover environment for a total of 10 separate days in any given calendar year. What that means is, if you have Oracle database and you have a disaster recovery environment, it needs to be licensed unless they share the same single storage or SAN. So what I've done here is I've actually given an example of what would be allowed under this term and condition. So here's a disaster recovery environment where we have 3 servers, 2 are active, 1 are passive. They all share the same SAN. Again, with a core multiplier of 0.5, there would be a requirement in this environment for 16 enterprise processor licenses, so 8 on server 1 and 8 on server 2. And again, because they're sharing the same SAN, if server 1 was to fall over and server 3 was to come alive and take over the role of server 1, it would still be 16 enterprise processor licenses, so there would be no increase in your licensing requirement. If you're doing any other type of disaster recovery with Oracle, then every single node needs to be licensed, and you're only allowed to have 1 passive node not licensed per SAN, so per disaster recovery environment. Also as well, just to kind of talk around the 10-day rule. So you'll remember from the previous page that Oracle allow you to have a disaster recovery environment up for 10 calendar days per year. An important thing to remember with this is even if a server fails over and the passive machine is active for an hour in that day, that counts as 1 full day of the calendar year. It doesn't count as an hour, so you can't just total up 24 hours times by 10 days. It counts as 1 individual hour for the day that 1 individual day for the hour that it fell over. So again, you need to be a little bit careful about that. One thing that is left that would be picked up by scripts is obviously when server 3 in this scenario was active. So that's another thing Oracle would be looking for in the event of an audit. How often are your passive servers awake? So moving on to section 3. This is really a crucial one around database. So database options, I'm sure you're aware of this, but some people on the call may not know the extent that they could potentially be exposed around database options. So Oracle Database Enterprise Edition actually comes with all options available, and Oracle make it really easy for these options to be activated. So there's no license key required. Anyone from your IT department in their innocence could potentially go onto the Oracle database and go, hey, here's something I want to try. Start it up, and before you know, you've got an extra bill that you need to pay for a license or something that you're probably not going to use moving forward. So the 3 questions you need to ask yourself really is, how do you check which options you used? How do you limit access to the options or pack functionality? And have you ever tested option or pack functionality? For the vast majority of customers, you don't get Oracle for test and dev. So even if you're testing an option with the view to potentially deploying it in the future, that could be seen as someone actually using it. And it will certainly be the approach that LMS or Coles would take. So again, I've given a basic example for this one. So we just got a standalone server, again, 4 CPUs, quad-core, running Enterprise Edition. So the licenses, these are just indicative costings, but the licenses you would need would be 8 enterprise processor licenses. Approximately for that one server is $224K with $50K annual support. But the question you need to ask yourself is if some options have been used. So say, for example, someone's enabled Active Data Guard. Well, that's another $55K with another $12K of annual support. If potentially someone's done some testing on partitioning, that's another 55k or another 12k in annual support. And if someone's activated spatial, that's another 84k with another 18.5k in annual support. So just on this one server, if someone in their innocence has had a fiddle around with these options, you're not looking anymore at 224k of software with 50k of annual support. You're actually looking at 418k and 92k and a half of annual support. So it's almost double the cost of the licensing and the annual support on that. So these things can really stack up quite quickly. And if you imagine if you're a customer and you're doing that in a VMware environment, or you have a disaster recovery option that's sitting in the background, well, you know, it could be many multiples more of that. So you just have to be very careful. So how can you be prepared for an audit? So again, I've kind of alluded to being pre-prepared and engaging with a partner such as Civica to review the estate before Oracle start knocking on your door. But the Civica approach to this is quite a simple one, really. It's the same thing we do for most of our vendors. But the first step is to understand your Oracle agreement. Okay, so you need to look at what am I licensed to use? What are my contractual obligations? You know, what do I have to do around the audit clause? Understanding all of that key information is really crucial before embarking on auditing your estate. And sometimes some of the rules for Oracle are kind of hidden within, you know, some of the terms and conditions. They're kind of all over the place sometimes. So knowing all those rules are absolutely key. Secondly, understanding your Oracle deployment. So as with the previous example, we can see there that someone in IT may well think that they've got an Oracle database deployed in an environment, and they may think, you know, that's just 8 enterprise processor licenses, and we've got it locked down by VMware, and we've tried a couple of options, but we decided not to use them. This is all we have to pay. Well, without understanding, you know, the additional functionality of what was being used on those servers and what potentially could happen if Oracle got wind of the fact it's a VMware estate, then, you know, that can blow things way out of proportion. Thirdly, understand your licensing position. So this really comes down to reconciliation and how we marry up licensing data with your deployment data. You know, are there any efficiencies that can be made at the back end of that? And what do we really do with the information, and what does that look like from a very high level? Obviously, if you're dealing with someone like Civica, then we will look to optimize your licensing to maintain a compliant position. So we'll do whatever we can within the terms and conditions to either help you design a new environment, or, you know, look to potentially change something in an existing environment which is beneficial to your organization. And then how do you manage that? What's the process for looking at that in the future? It's not just about resolving the issue, it's about making sure that that issue never ever happens again. And lastly, be ready to share your accurate data with Oracle. The guys over at Coles and LMS, if you are able to put the information in a format of which they're used to recognizing, and you have looked to have done your due diligence with the server worksheet, then you've got absolutely no issue with being ready to share your data with them. If we've had an internal review and we're convinced that the position is correct, then be courteous with them, deal with them nicely. It'll only go in your favor in the long term. So you may as well just share the information you've got and be confident that the position you have is accurate. So a quick call to action, and then I'll wrap things up. So if anything on this webinar has perked anyone's curiosity, perhaps you have recognized that you're doing something on VMware Hyper-V, or perhaps you have a disaster recovery environment that's not completely been licensed correctly, then what we at Civica are actually willing to offer is a quick 10 to 15 minute free qualification call. There's absolutely no obligation to buy anything from us. We will happily jump on a call with you, talk through your potential issue, and give you an assessment, in our opinion, of whether or not you may have a compliance problem or not. We need a 10-15 call basically to scope it out with you, and, you know, try and find out what you're doing and what you could potentially put in place to measure that and to change that. If anyone on the call is interested in proceeding with one of those qualifications call, I'd ask you to email sam@civica.co.uk, and someone will get back to you immediately with some call details, which would be happy to set up for you. So on that note, I'd like to thank everyone for attending the call, and as I say, any questions, send across an email through to sam@civica, and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you very much.